Hello everybody, this is overview for activity 2.7, viewing and configuring virtual memory settings. I've had to make a change or two to the actual virtual machine, and you'll see in a second what I did. For the sake of this lab, we needed a machine that actually has two hard disks in order to move the swap file, and you'll see that in a second. So I'll show you the change that I've made. Coming into Manage, looking under Disk Management, here is where our Windows 2003 server is installed, which is on drive C, first partition. I then added a second drive. In this case it's going to be drive E, and it must be addressed as such, as a readable drive with an NTFS partition, just like the first one. Now we could do it as a FAT32 or possibly some other, but we really don't want to, because for the sake of efficiency and stability we want to keep as native a format as possible. So in this case I just added a 5 gigabyte virtual drive that we're going to use as an actual swapping drive. What are the advantages of doing this? And it will allude it when it talks about virtual memory in the system. Virtual memory is basically memory mimicked in a special file on the hard disk. In this case we only have half a gigabyte of memory on this system, as you can see right here. And if we need more, as we add more processes and as we make this thing do more tasks, become an application server, whatever, just by default Windows needs a swap file. It becomes very unstable if it doesn't have some form of a swap file, at least a small size. There are actually two types of virtual memory files that you'll deal with. One is going to be pagefile.sys, which is the actual virtual memory. It takes this memory, the 512 of physical RAM, and then it will incorporate a certain amount of hard disk space where it will literally dump and swap things back and forth in a raw format as pages, memory pages, from the disk to memory, to mimic more space in RAM. Then you have the Hibernate file, which is actually a little bit different. That just saves the state of the machine before you send it into a Hibernate mode, so when you shut it down, when you restart it, it will come back to that state, exactly where the Hibernate file was. So there's actually two versions of virtual memory for Windows, but we're mainly concerned with pagefile.sys. So when we, for example, let's say we look up Task Manager to see our currently running processes, and we notice here we have CPU utilization and commitment memory. Notice it says it's committed 96. Well, 96 of what? Out of 1250, whereas we only have 512 megabytes of physical memory. The total available to the system is actually a little over a gigabyte. And that's where we can see here physical memory being used, and then we have system cache, additional available memory plus whatever's reserved, with a total of approximately 1250, so 1.2 gigs approximately of total memory available between virtual memory and physical memory. So for this lab, what we want to do is we want to come over here under Advanced, under System Properties. Again, that's right click, My Computer, Properties, and we have here Performance, Visual Effects, Scheduling, Memory Usage, and Virtual Memory. And that's what we want to look at. So visual effects, of course, you really don't need these things. We come under the Advanced tab, and here's where we can choose different ways of how the system is going to work. In this case, we have the virtual memory. Total swap file size is 768 megabytes, plus the 512 gives us that 1.2 gigs of total memory of RAM, both physical and virtual, the machine can use. Now in this case we want to change it. We want to change the different values. You notice here it's a little bit different what the book says, because it's based upon how much memory the system had at startup. It will generally create a file that's usually 1 to 1.5 times what the default is, which is minimum 256, so 1.5 times is 384 megabytes. In this case, I actually installed it with 512, so it stepped it up 512 plus a little bit, brings it up to 768, with a maximum of usually 2 to 3 times. And they always recommend going from 1.5 to 2 times as your range for virtual memory. And you notice, where is it? It's on drive C, which, if you recall from disk management, is our system file. So every time it hits the virtual memory, it's going to slow the system down because it's swapping back and forth. That's why it's called a swap file. It's swapping chunks of data at a time between the hard disk and the RAM. And we don't necessarily want it. So a better arrangement would be to add a second drive to the server and put the swap file on it. So that way, when we're loading stuff for Windows operations, it's loading off of our first drive, and then anytime it needs to swap, it's swapping it independently on this drive. So this drive is running at full speed, and our swap file can then run independently on its own drive, and therefore also run at its full speed. So we actually get a performance boost. And especially when it's doing major operations, when it's doing large amounts of data swapping between the pagefile.sys and RAM, is where you'll really notice a difference. That's why you'll sometimes notice systems that are performing exceptionally slow at times, because they may be swapping. You'll see the hard disk just constantly grinding away. Windows is notorious for that. So this is one way to isolate it so that it speeds it up a lot faster, because in the middle of pulling everything off of that page file, like I said, you're also loading and unloading files for Windows as well, depending upon what you're doing. And especially if those things are coming in and out, driver files or whatever, or program files or services that are coming in and out of RAM, you're again always accessing that hard disk. Well, you're accessing it doubly so. So for the sake of this argument, let's say we want to change this, and we're going to actually put this thing down on the D drive according to this experiment. So first thing we want to do is we want to change it. So we need to create, and for the numbers in the book we say 384 as the initial size, and a max size of 512, which matches our install we're going to set. Then we're going to remove this by hitting no paging file, saying set. Yes. So now you notice that not only have we changed the size of it per what the book says, we've also changed the location of the swap file. Another option is system managed. This will just allow Windows to pick its own size based upon the constraints. It will start at boot at a minimum of 384 and end, it will go no higher than 512. So if you run out of memory, that's when it will start giving you errors about running out of virtual memory, running out of physical RAM. Running without a paging file is not recommended. So it's saying we need to restart. Let's say we want to apply. If we come back here and hit change, you notice the changes have stuck. So we're going to have to reboot for this to take effect. And the reason is, here looking at the C drive, we want to expose critical system files, and you'll notice we have the page file. Okay, so that's on C drive. Looking on E, that's our newly created one. When we reboot, you should notice that the system, the pagefile.sys, that system file will disappear, and we'll then be using the new page file, which will be on the second drive. So we're going to reboot, and in the middle of this, Windows is actually booting up. It might take a second or two longer to boot, because part of what it has to do is it has to recreate a new page file. So it's not necessarily going to copy it, it's just going to create a new one, and then it's going to start loading stuff into it, and it will destroy the old one. We'll also notice that our numbers will change for the actual amount of memory we have to use for the system. So logging in. Being in a virtual environment, you may not notice a significant difference, but on a physical machine, especially an older one, you would notice a significant difference. So coming under Advanced, checking our settings, and we notice, currently minimum versus what we have allocated. They're just basically saying a minimum of 2 megs. They're recommending this minimum of 766. We're actually below, but if you notice, it doesn't show a swap file. And when we go to browse, when we go to browse our C drive, you notice that pagefile.sys is gone because we have moved the location of the page file. So we're now actively using this one. You'll also notice if we run Task Manager that our numbers have changed. Whereas before we had 1.2, it's a drop now to 887 megabytes. So that's how we know that we've made a change to the virtual memory settings, and those changes have taken effect. And as you saw, any changes to virtual memory, just like making changes to physical memory, you're going to have to take the machine down and restart it. So making those changes is part of maintenance, but you do not want to make those kind of changes on a production server unless you're ready to shut it down. So that actually is part of planning. This concludes our run-through of virtual memory in Activity 2-7. Thank you very much.